The Great Mismatch, Ideas Built for a World That No Longer Exists by Kevin Benedict. To understand what is happening in the United States today, you have to look beneath politics, headlines, and daily events. What we are experiencing is not simply disagreement or dysfunction. It is something deeper, a mismatch between the philosophical foundations that shape the nation and the radically different conditions of the modern world. For most of its history, the United States has operated on a powerful set of ideas about freedom, work, responsibility, and progress. These ideas came from Enlightenment thinkers, religious traditions, economic theories, and lived experience on a vast frontier. They formed a kind of invisible operating system, guiding how people think, act, and judge what is fair or legitimate. But the world those ideas were built on no longer exists. Today, we live in a system defined by speed, complexity, and interdependence, conditions that strain and in some cases even break the assumptions those philosophies depended on. What we are witnessing is not the failure of America's ideas, it is their mismatch with a new modern reality. The philosophical foundations of the United States emerged in a very different time and environment. When thinkers like John Locke described individual rights and limited government, they were imagining a world where people could reasonably understand the systems around them. Cause and effect were visible, actions and outcomes were closely linked. When the Constitution came around, it was designed to slow power down, to prevent tyranny by creating friction, deliberation, and balance. When economic life drew from Adam Smith, markets were human scale. Buyers and sellers interacted in ways that were relatively transparent. And when cultural norms were shaped by religious traditions, later analyzed by Max Weber, work was directly tied to survival, identity, and moral purpose. Even the myth of the self-reliant individual, the person carving out a life on the frontier, was rooted in a world where independence felt tangible and real. All of these ideas made sense in that context. They worked. They created a system that was both resilient and generative. But they were built for a world that moved at human speed. Today, that world has changed in fundamental ways. Economic systems are global and algorithmically managed. Decisions are made in milliseconds. Information travels instantly across networks that no single person can fully understand. Supply chains stretch across continents and oceans. Digital platforms shape what we see, what we buy, and even what we believe today. In this environment, the relationship between cause and effect becomes harder to see. Responsibility becomes harder to assign, and the ability of individuals or even institutions to fully understand what is happening begins to break down. This is where the mismatch begins. At the heart of the American identity is the belief in the individual, the idea that people are responsible for their own outcomes, that they can shape their destiny through choice and effort. But modern systems do not operate at the level of the individual. They operate at the level of networks. Your job, your healthcare, your financial stability, even your access to information are shaped by systems that are vast, interconnected, and often invisible. This creates a tension that many people feel but struggle to articulate. On one hand, the culture says you are responsible for your success. On the other hand, reality suggests your outcomes are heavily dependent and shaped by systems that are far beyond your control. When these two ideas collide, the result is frustration, confusion, and often anger. People feel blamed for outcomes they cannot fully control, while also feeling powerless to change them. Trust begins to erode, not just in institutions, but in the fairness of the system itself. The American system of government was deliberately designed to move slowly. Checks and balances, separation of power, and layered decision-making were intended to prevent rash decisions and the concentration of power. Slowness was a feature, not a flaw. But today the environment has changed. Financial markets react in real time. Cyber threats emerge instantly. Public narratives spread across the globe in seconds. Crises unfold faster than traditional institutions can respond. This creates a visible mismatch. Institutions appear ineffective, not necessarily because they are poorly designed, but because they are operating at a speed that no longer matches the environment. The system cannot complete its decision cycles fast enough to even keep up. What once protected stability now often feels like paralysis. For generations, Americans have tied identity and dignity to work. Work has not been only a means of survival. It has been a source of meaning, purpose, and social value. The harder you work, the more you are seen as contributing, deserving, and successful. But automation and artificial intelligence are changing that relationship. Machines can now perform tasks that once required human effort, often faster, cheaper, more accurately than humans. Entire categories of work are being transformed or eliminated by AI. This creates a profound psychological tension. If work is the foundation of identity, what happens when work is no longer required in the same way? People are left trying to maintain a sense of purpose within a system that is quietly removing the very structures that once provided it. The result is often anxiety, disorientation, and a search for new forms of meaning. The United States has long believed in the power of free markets, systems where individuals make choices, compete, and create value. But modern markets are no longer purely human spaces. They are shaped by algorithms, platforms, social media, and data systems that influence outcomes in ways that are not always visible or understandable. Prices change dynamically. Recommendations are personalized. Opportunities are filtered through systems few people ever see. The belief in a fair and open marketplace begins to weaken when people feel that outcomes are being shaped behind the scenes. This does not necessarily mean markets have disappeared, but it does mean they become harder to perceive and trust. And when people cannot see how a system works, they often begin to question whether it is working for them at all. One of the most enduring American ideas is the belief in independence, the idea that individuals can stand on their own, make their own way, and rely on themselves. But modern life depends on systems, electric grids, digital networks, global logistics, healthcare infrastructure, and financial systems all operate in the background, supporting everyday life in ways that are easy to overlook until they fail. This creates a subtle but powerful contradiction. Culturally, people see themselves as independent. Practically, they are deeply dependent. When this gap is exposed during crises, outages, or disruptions, it can produce strong emotional reaction. Not just frustration, but a sense of violated expectation, because the system people depended on was never fully acknowledged. The United States has a long tradition of pragmatism, the idea that truth is discovered through experience, experimentation, and what works in practice. But this depends on a shared sense of reality. Today, information ecosystems are fragmented. People receive different facts, different narratives, and different interpretations of the very same events. Algorithms personalize information flows, reinforcing existing beliefs. When people cannot agree on basic facts, the ability to solve problems together begins to break down. Debates shift from what should we do to what is even real. This is not just a media problem, it is a foundational challenge to how a society makes decisions. Across all these tensions, there's a deeper pattern. The system still assumes that humans can understand what is happening, keep up with the pace of change, make informed decisions, bear responsibility for outcomes. But the reality is increasingly different. Systems have become too complex to fully comprehend. The speed of change exceeds human cognitive limits. Cause and effect are harder to trace. Responsibility is often assigned without corresponding control. This is what might be called the breaking of the human assumption. The idea that the system can continue to rely on human understanding and oversight in the same way it once did, because it can't. From the outside, all of this can look like crisis. Political division, institutional distrust, cultural conflict, and economic anxiety all appear as signs of breakdown. But there is another way to see it. What we are experiencing is a transition, a shift from one operating environment to another. The philosophical foundations of the United States are not disappearing, but they are losing their fit with current conditions. They were designed for a world that no longer exists. If the problem is a mismatch between ideas and environment, then the solution is not to abandon those ideas, but to adapt the very systems that carry them. The challenge is to build a new kind of operating model, one that can function at this modern speed and complexity while still preserving what matters most: human judgment, dignity, and meaning. This requires recognizing that no single form of intelligence is sufficient. Machines can process information at scale and speed. Humans bring ethics, context, and purpose. Natural systems offer models of balance and sustainability. The future will depend on how well we can integrate these different forms of intelligences into systems that are both effective and humane. The Great Mismatch is not just about politics or technology. It is about the tension between how we think the world works and how it actually works. It is the gap between inherited stories of independence and the reality of interdependence, between systems designed for slowness and environments defined by speed, between visible cause and effect and hidden complexity. That gap creates pressure on individuals, on institutions, and on societies. But pressure is also a signal. It tells us that something no longer fits and that it is time to redesign the systems so that the values we care about, freedom, fairness, dignity, and opportunity, can continue to exist in this very different world. That is the real work ahead of us.